So now let's talk about the veal scallopini piccata. That recipe, the one we're doing tonight, is on my blog, bonicellicookingclub.com. Not all veal is created equal, and certainly I have very deep concerns about animal cruelty. What we're using tonight is called rose veal. Rose veal originated in the UK and refers to calves raised on farms in association with the UK Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. So the name rose comes from the pink color, which is partly because it's the result of the calves living longer and also eating a non-restrictive diet. So they're healthy, happy animals. This rose veal was raised in the rose veal tradition and is from Grillin' Meats in Minneapolis Farmers Market, at the Minneapolis Farmers Market. And their veal is pasture-raised, grass-fed, pen-free, and absolutely delicious. We went to the farm yesterday to get a tour, see some animals, and talk to Christina, the owner. I learned so much, and we took some video. So, Mark, can you run that?
British white cattle. They're an ancient breed. They date back over 3,000 years. I've been raising them for 25 years, and they've been in the United States since World War II. Churchill sent 5 cows and a bull to the United States to protect them because Hitler would go into areas, and when they would invade, they would take their national treasures. At that time, there wasn't very many British whites owned by peasants, and they were considered a national treasure. That's how the Lipizzaner horses, the white part cattle, which is a horned animal that looks kind of like a longhorn, but they're the same color as our white ones. And then the British whites, that's how they got to the United States. So before that, they weren't here.
So Churchill's cows.
Yeah, yep. Some of them were the royal cattle that were sent over here.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about the veal.
When we started doing rose veal about 8 years ago, the reason I do rose veal, which is different than veal, because veal is a calf that's basically stood in a pen and never been out of that pen its whole life.
Never seen the light of day.
Exactly. They're in a pen where they're only fed milk. Give them bedding because they don't want them eating anything but milk. Or sometimes they feed them milk and corn, and they don't feed them anything else because they just want them to be super tender, super fat, nothing else. So then you got a soft fat that has a simpler profile. The way we do veal, it's the one standing next to the black one here. They're old. If the counterparts, the male counterparts, are the ones that we would use for veal at that size. So the babies are just 2 to 4 weeks old. So 1 year later, they're almost as big as a cow. That's when we process them for veal. So we end up with those nice ribeyes and a little bit bigger cuts. And then, of course, all the cuts are a little bit bigger. But they're raised naturally. They're out here just like these babies. When these babies get big enough, if I decide that one of them would be better as a veal calf, then that's where they will go. So don't fall in love with them now.
Well, I think most people have a problem with veal because the animals are technically really mistreated.
Yeah, well, they're just raised in a really different way, and they're not raised in a natural way. And I think the difference between a natural way and a confinement, which is no different than the chicken and the pork that everybody's used to eating. People want everything to just melt in their mouth and not have to chew it. We're not eating bread. And I'm talking about Wonder Bread. Yes. I'm not talking about the great bread we find at the farmer's market that actually has some texture and life.
Right, and I think you're right that veal is about, typical veal is like about texture, no texture, but not really about flavor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And at this point with ours, it's starting to get a little flavor. it isn't red yet, because they don't turn red until their liver starts processing iron. Once they get to be about 10, 11 months old, that's when their body starts to process iron, and that's what makes the meat actually turn red. Up until then, it's pink, just like pork is the other white meat up until about 10 months of age. After that, once they get to that 12, 14, 16 months, that's when their meat turns red too.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, you are a wealth of information.
Be careful.
Science.
I know lots of stuff.
So, veal scallopini piccata. So here are my little scallopini, and what I did with these. So I had 2 pieces of meat that I got from Christina, and they were actually, the cut was sirloin tip, which is actually one of my favorite cuts of beef to work with, and now veal. And so they came in 2 pieces. I pounded those pieces out first, about halfway, down to about a half an inch, and then I cut them into scallopini, that refers to the scallop, kind of a scallopini shape, and then pounded them further. Did that whole process in a Ziploc bag, and here they are, and you can see they're quite thin, and I use this guy. So I promised Mark that I wouldn't do much pounding because I know it's off-putting, but that's what I did. And I like to just get them about as thin as I can get them to be without tearing, and they're definitely there. Okay, so let's put this guy aside and take them out of my Ziploc, and you can see how thin those are. Definitely about 1/4 of an inch. So they'll be nice and tender, and they would be tender anyway, but now with the pounding, and that's the typical thing that you do with scallopini, is you pound them down. And then what I'm going to do, take one of these gloves off for this, is I'm going to hit these with a little salt and pepper. And I'm just going to do one side. That's kind of your call. But the sauce that we're going to be making is pretty rich. It doesn't have any cream in it, but it does have kind of a substantial amount of butter. And then we're going to add salt to that as well. So I'm just going to do one side of these. And they're very, very thin, so I don't want them over salted. And then freshly ground black pepper. Anytime I'm doing a process like this, I wear gloves. Just because I don't have to keep running to the sink to wash my hands, that's one reason. Also, I just feel better about dredging things when I've got gloves on. So what we're going to do with these is, I've got a 1/2 cup of flour here. We're just going to dredge them like that. Now, some recipes for piccata will have you do flour and then egg, or egg and then flour. And I like, especially if I'm cooking with veal, I like it to be lighter. And then they'll go into this. And I use pie plates for this whole process because they're shallow and I have a lot of them. There we go. This, by the way, is not a full 2 pounds of veal. This is probably about 1.25 pounds of veal. I'd have to look, but not a full 2 pounds. But after we're done here, Mark and I are going to have dinner, and there are only 2 of us here. So I kind of selected some that a little less meat. Although sad, right? Sad, no leftovers. Right, too bad. Oh well. Okay, and there is that. Okay, and I'm shaking off all the excess. I'm making sure they're nicely coated, but I'm shaking off all of the excess. And this is going to help them brown and give them just a little bit of a crispy kind of outer layer. Okay, again, I'm taking off another set of gloves, and I'm going to get rid of this. And I'll get rid of this too. Okay, now here, you can't see this, I have 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter, and 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. And I'm going to turn my heat on to about medium here. And I'm going to melt the two together. Well, basically, I'm going to melt the butter into the olive oil. It shouldn't take very long. And I like using both because the butter, if I just used butter, it would burn very easily. The olive oil, although it's not certainly doesn't have the highest smoke temperature of all the oils you could use, but it is olive oil, so it will impart flavor and richness and all those kinds of good things that olive oil does, and it's good for you. But the butter will be able to be at a higher heat, and the browning will go better because of the olive oil. So that's why I'm using both. And you'll note I am using less meat, but I'm going to make the same amount of sauce because I love this sauce. So I am very happy to have more sauce, less meat. It's okay with me. And this again is hopefully at about medium. I'm starting to see it sizzle up here, which means it's just about ready. And I'm going to just let it get a little bit hotter. I kind of like to see it bubbling all over the place. Okay, and here are my cutlets. Now these are so thin that the total cooking time should be about 3 minutes. Now if I had the full 2 pounds of meat, I would definitely do these in 2 batches. I am thinking, if I'm clever here, that I can get this all into 1 pan because I'm doing less meat. And I think I'm going to be able to do it. I'm going to raise that heat just a little bit. So what this dish is it's like the perfect, actually last-minute meal. And if you're entertaining and you want to just have all of this ready and just do this at the last minute, it's pretty stress-free as long as you have all of your ingredients prepped. Don't need this anymore. And you'll see that the meat starts to kind of shrink up a little bit. I'm good with all of this bubbling. Now, if this were the typical veal that is not roast veal, this meat would be much lighter. It would be almost white, almost like a chicken white. You can see how my little scallops are starting to tighten up. So now they do fit in the pan, right? Because it's smaller. I'm starting to get some browning. Let it go just a little bit longer and then we'll flip these over. All right, let's go. Yep, getting some nice browning. Now I would say because the meat kind of seizes up and shrinks, these are going to wind up being about a ½ inch by the time we're done cooking them. And now I'm going to bring that heat down just a bit. There we go. Now if I were doing these in batches, I would have an oven behind me, that one, set at 200 degrees. I'd put them on either a baking sheet or the platter itself at 200 degrees and let them sit there while I finish the dish. But because I'm doing less than the full amount of meat, we're going to go ahead and just put them on the platter and hold them because it really doesn't take very long to finish this off. It smells fantastic. We give another 30 seconds here and then we're pulling these off.
Christina says hi.
Hey, Christina. Did you like your video? You were wonderful. Thank you so much for the tour and spending time with us yesterday. Okay, so I'm going to turn this off while I pull these off, and we'll get these onto our platter. Not going to bother temping this because they might be a little bit rare on the inside, but they have definitely cooked long enough. Now, I've got, set this back here for the time. I've got all of these wonderful meat juices in my butter and olive oil. What could be better than that? Let's turn this back up here. Now, I've got 1/3 cup of dry white wine. Let's add that in. We're basically going to deglaze the pan, which essentially means that I'm going to spend a little time getting all of those meat bits off of the bottom of the pan so that they will become a part of my gorgeous sauce. And this process, we're not going to take this all the way down. We want about half of this left. So I'm just going to spend my time doing that, and everything comes up very nicely. It's not a big problem to do this. Okay. And quickly, while that is deglazing, let me just turn that down just a smidge. I'm going to slice a lemon. These are going to go right into my sauce in a second here. As thin as you can get them. And that wine cooking down is going to make this sauce very rich, kind of fortified. Okay, I'm going to actually take a couple of these out just because we're using less meat. This is the one thing I will cut down on. And any of the seeds that you can get out, take out, so you're not eating lemon seeds. Very pretty and very bright. This adds a really nice, bright, acidy flavor to the sauce, which really brings out the flavor in the meat. Okay, let's see how this is doing. I think that looks great. Now, we're going to add I think it's 1.25 cups of chicken stock. Slowly pour that in. Okay, now I'm going to bring my heat back up. I also have to cook this down. This is going to take a little bit longer than the wine did. But while that's coming up to temp, let me get rid of the rest of my seeds here. I've written several piccata recipes. You know, it's kind of a traditional Italian dish with lots of different versions. Some of them have well, whatever kind of meat you're using, dipped in egg, some don't, different ratios of wine and different things in the sauce, that type of thing. But it's one of my favorite dishes. It goes together so quickly. It's truly elegant, but it's kind of rustic in a way too. And what it reminds me of, in Austria, they have a Wiener Schnitzel, and yeah, Germany. Same type of thing with veal dipped in, usually that is egg and breading and that type of thing. And okay, so this is now boiling. Let's throw in our lemon slices. Now, here's the thing about this. Because I have the whole lemon in there, so I'm getting some of that pith because, well, I am getting the pith because the whole rind is in there. This has a little bit of a bitter tinge to it. I'm also going to add some lemon juice at the end here. Now, if you don't like that bitterness, you could save these and garnish with them later, or put them in at the end and don't cook them as long, and that will save you from some of that bitterness. I, however, love that. So in this case, not in every case, and I'm thinking of the lemon pasta that I make. I do not like it with pasta, and the lemon pasta dish that it's one of my signature dishes, but I do love it when it's with this, paired with this meat. So wonderful. I should mention again too, Christina, hello, if you're watching still. Please do stay on. If you do have any questions specifically for Christina, she is on Facebook. So if you do the @GrillAndMeats, you can find her there. If you have any questions for her specifically, again, go to her website. It's a wonderful site, lots of information. And she will be there, and she is there every Saturday and Sunday at the Minneapolis Farmers Market. So we still have a little bit of time to go here before I can finish this sauce off. Mark, do I have any questions that I can deal with while this is?
Can you use any other meats or poultry for this recipe?
Can you use other meats? Yeah. In terms of the beef world, I think that we've got it covered with this roast veal, because it's going to be beautifully tender, and the dish was really designed for that. But as I said earlier, I have a lot of piccata recipes, scallopini recipes that I've written for chicken. I've even seen turkey recipes, although I've never done that myself. And sometimes I'll use chicken thighs and pound those out. Sometimes I use tenders, which work pretty well, and sometimes breasts, and I cut those into the scallopini. So you kind of have a lot of ways that you can go with this, and if you are just not a veal fan for whatever reason, then go the chicken route, and that works out pretty well too. I don't have a vegetarian version of it, so sorry about that.
Can this be made ahead?
This can be made ahead, absolutely. When we serve this in catering and in my restaurant, which I think we only did for special occasions, it was never on the main menu, but for catering, we would always make it ahead and reheat it. And I wouldn't say it's better, like some things just get better when they sit for a day, like chili or pot roast. I wouldn't say it's necessarily better, but it's not worse. It's pretty much the same. So that is a really good route to go. I'm just going to let this go a little bit longer. And we would make it, and store it. Sometimes we would do it, not put the sauce in with the meat, just so that it wouldn't get soggy. So we would store the meat in one place, the sauce in another place, combine them at the last minute. And usually, right now, we're assuming that meat is still warm enough, even though it's been sitting back there for a while. I should have it in the oven if you're going to serve it right away. Put it in the oven, and then you would pour the sauce over the top. What we would do is heat the sauce, put the veal into it for 30 seconds, and it's thin enough where it warms up really quickly. Almost there. You can see what's happening here is that the insides of these lemons are cooking out. Look at that. And the rind is really good. So it's not just for the benefit of making this lemony and adding flavor. You actually can eat the rind with the meat, which is really delicious, and one of the reasons I love this recipe, and it's really pretty. I'm going to go a little bit longer. Be patient with me. I was looking today too, as far as what part of Italy this is actually from, and I could not find a consensus. But I would say it's probably from mid to southern Italy, and there are lots of versions from different places. But the Italians, if they've got lemon trees, they're going to make something with lemons, and so wherever they had lemon trees, they probably came up with a version of this dish. Almost there. And what this is doing as it's boiling down is it's getting more concentrated and more delicious, and those meat juices are melding into the lemoniness and the chicken stock that I put in there. And chicken stock, if you had veal stock, you could definitely use veal stock. Beef stock, I think, would be too beefy tasting, personally. So that's the reason I put chicken stock in the recipe. So it's hard to tell if you're really halfway down, but I think it's probably been a good 5 minutes since I started this process, maybe a little bit longer. So I'm going to say this is good. So what I have here is 4 things that I'm going to add to this. More butter. And I'm going to turn this down a little bit now. This is 2 more tablespoons of unsalted butter. So we were talking yesterday, this didn't make the film, but in the chef's world, we always say that fat is flavor. And that's why in so many restaurant dishes you'll see added fat, and that's just because fat carries flavor. So salt enhances flavor, so that's the reason you see those things cropping up. And now look at how that sauce is starting to thicken. So pretty. Okay, then I have a 1/4 cup of lemon juice, more lemon. So this sauce is now going to become incredibly intense. Let's just let this kind of, and look how this is turning into almost a gravy. That's that butter. And the fact that we reduced everything. Let's bring that back up to a simmer. And I'm going to go ahead and taste this at this point, see if I need to add. I'm sure I have to add some salt, and I'll add a little pepper. Wow, it's very intense. Give it another taste. Perfect, okay. Then, capers. I have a 1/4 cup of capers. That's going to give it a kind of a piquant quality to it, and it's really pretty, and I love capers so much. So a 1/4 cup of those and a 1/4 cup of chopped Italian parsley. And let's turn this off because we are done. That is it. Can you believe how much that sauce thickens? I mean, it's still thin, but it's just got a nice body to it. It smells fantastic. Okay, let me get rid of this, and I'll bring my platter with my cutlets. Now you can serve this over pasta, which I think is lovely. Risotto on the side would be nice, and I'm just going to spoon this sauce like this. Fill up the bottom of the plate and arrange the lemons and the capers around it. Gorgeous. Any other questions, Mark?
That's all I have right now.
Okay. So coming up, the thing I'm so looking forward to that whole farmers market week, because the market's just going to be kind of having joyous fun, especially on the 7th, and then we're doing our corn spectacular. So August is going to be great, and I love peak season, and it's right now. Every time you go to the market, you're going to find something new, and that is just such fun. Okay. All right, there is my veal scallopini piccata. Can't wait to have dinner. Thank you everyone so much for watching. Thank you to the Minneapolis Farmers Market for sharing your Facebook space, and remember to go to BonicelliCookingClub.com to get the recipes. By the way, the Farmers Market has a new newsletter. Go to their website, Farmers Market, and sign up for that because it's got tons of great information. These videos will live here in the feed, and Mark is going to put up our little special offer for Farmers Market folks in a second here, and we'll also post these on YouTube, so they'll live there and in the Cooking Club as well. I will see you next Thursday at 5 o'clock right here, and we'll see you then. Take care, everyone. Mwah.